Hello and welcome to the second session on Buddhism. Kshanikavada, Nairatmyavada, Nirvana, Bodhisattva. Kshanikavada or Anityavada or the theory of momentariness. Theory of momentariness is a great contribution of Buddhism to Indian philosophy. It is a best attempt to explain the nature of reality. Buddhism developed this theory based on the noble truths of Gautama. Existence, according to Buddha, in this world is continuous birth, decay and death. The universe is a constant flow. The Buddhists developed this idea into the doctrine of the momentariness of all existence. P.T. Raju observes, everything is continuously changing. Nothing exists even for a moment. Every event is born, stays and dies in the same moment. According to many Buddhists, birth, stay and death are not three moments, but only one. Continuity is only an appearance, not the truth. Every momentary existence leaves its impress in the next, that in its next and so on. So long as the same form continues, we think that it is the same being, but in fact it is only the form that is the same. The being or existence of the thing is different from moment to moment. He concludes the observation. In Indian philosophy, we should note there is no difference between being and existence. Each momentary being of a thing is similar to the preceding and succeeding because of the transmitted form. When the form itself goes, we say the thing is destroyed. According to Buddha, nothing continues to be the same even for two consecutive moments. All things constantly change. The similes that are usually given in Buddhist literature are those of the river and the burning flame. One cannot step into the river twice. At no two moments is there the same flame. In both cases, similarity is mistaken for identity. For Buddha, neither being nor non-being is real. What is real is becoming. There is change, but there is no changing thing. Momentariness is closely related to Muttapad. Momentariness proves the cause and effect principle of Pratiti Samutpada. Any action takes place due to some cause, and in the absence of a cause, no action can take place. Thus, all things originate from some cause and they are momentary. The continuity of birth and death proves that the birth and death are nature of the universe. In other words, there is nothing permanent in this world and everything is perishable. Momentariness is the nature of everything. Existence is impermanent. All things, mental and physical, are transitory. Impermanence is the inexorable law of existence. All individuals are series of momentary state of consciousness. There is no permanent soul behind the series of momentary psychosis. There is only succession of momentary mental process. A past mental process has lived, but it neither lives nor will it live. A future mental process will live, but it neither lives nor has it lived. A present mental process lives, but it has neither lived nor will it live. The life of an individual lasts only while a mental process lasts. An individual is a child, a boy, a youth, an old man. He is a succession of change with no identity in his body and mind. All existences are essenceless and impermanent. This is the universal law. The physical world and psychical world are devoid of self or essence. Though Buddhism emphasized the nature of the Anityavada, they successfully avoided dogmatic extremes of eternalism and annihilationism. Puligandala writes, it should be emphasized that the Buddha recommends the doctrine of dependent origination as the middle way which avoids the two dogmatic extremes of eternalism and annihilationism. Eternalism is dogmatic since according to it, reality consists of unchanging and permanent entities. Annihilationism is the equal dogmatic teaching that contrary to our experience. Reality is made of entities that simply perish away without leaving any trace. The doctrine of dependent origination is truly the middle way, the way of becoming, in that it teaches not only that the objects of our experience exist not however absolutely and unconditionally, but dependently and conditionally, but also that owing to its conditional existence, every object, instead of simply perishing away, produce some effect or other. It may be remarked in passing that, in the light of the doctrine of dependent origination, the common expression "the world is changing" is misleading, in that it suggests that there exists some permanent entity called the world undergoing change. Instead, the correct expression is "the world is change," change being understood in the sense of conditional existence. Nairatmyavada. One of the foundational principles of Buddhism is its concept of Anatmavada or Nairatmyavada. Concept of Anatmavada based on the theory of dependent origination. It is an age-old belief in almost all cultures that there exists in man eternal and permanent entity variously known as soul, self of the spirit. In short, there exists in man a substance called the soul. Philosophers as well as primitive people subscribe to this belief. The philosophers hold that soul is the essence of man. Thus, although man's body change and perish, his soul is changeless and immortal, abiding and immutable. The soul in Jainism is known as Jiva and Hinduism as the Atman. In sharp contrast to these philosophies and religion, the Buddha teaches that there is no permanent and enduring entity in man. According to the theory of dependent origination, everything exists dependently and conditionally. There can be nothing that is permanent and unchanging. Buddha asks every man to enter into his deepest recess and examine whether he could ever become aware of an unchanging entity called the soul. All one could become aware of when one thinks of oneself or soul is a sensation, an impression, a perception, an image, etc., but never a thing or a substance called self or soul. So, according to the Buddhism, there is no soul, and for Buddha to believe that there is soul is a tragic delusion, just as there is no soul, there is no thing too. A thing is nothing but an aggregate of sense data. Apart from orange color, sweet taste, there is no orange. What we refer to as things are only aggregates of phenomena hanging together. What is called soul or thing is a mere name for a complex constituents, Namarupa, the concept of a soul as a substrate of the changing state of consciousness, or a thing as bearer of attributes is a myth. There is no unity holding together the states or the attributes. In his lifetime, Buddha's refusal to answer the question whether the Atman existed or not was taken by his followers as his denial of its existence. If somebody argues that the Atman exists, that Atman is momentary, because the fundamental truth of Buddhism holds that everything is sorrow or unreal. Any eternal being was impossible according to the doctrine of momentariness. So, the Buddhists denied completely any reality of the Atman. But does not every man say that he has an Atman which speaks of itself as the I? The I is not the Atman. It is simply the unity of several aggregates that appears as the I and is mistaken to be the Atman. On proper analysis, the Atman shows itself not as a distinct entity, but as an aggregate of the 5 aggregates or skandhas. Puligandala says, Buddha analyzes man into 5 groups or skandhas. 1. Form or matter. 2. feeling or pleasant unpleasant, 3 perceptions or sight and smell, 4 impulses or hate, greed, etc. 5 consciousness. Anything a man thinks he is or has must fall into one or other of these 5 heaps. The self or soul is simply an abbreviation for the aggregate of these skandhas and not some entity above and over the aggregates. Thus, there is no distinct substance known as self or Atman. To think otherwise is to labor under a fond but dangerous illusion. Notice also that every one of the skandhas is subject to the doctrine of dependent origination. If we analyze ourselves, we find only these 5 aggregates and we do not find anything beyond them that can be called the Atman. Each part of the aggregation is only momentary existence. Nirvana lies in going beyond this momentariness. Here, it is important to dispel a common misunderstanding concerning the doctrine of anatta. It is often said that through his doctrine of anatta, the Buddha denies man a self or soul, but this view is wrong and mistaken. The Buddha do not deny the existence of soul or self understood as the collection of the skandhas. What he does deny is the belief that there exists behind and beyond the skandhas a self or soul as permanent and unchanging entity. Buddha accept a changing soul or self, but reject an unchanging substantial self. Nirvana. The concept of nirvana has been a subject of great controversy among the Buddhist and the non-Buddhist alike. The concept of nirvana is immensely complex and has been the subject of a variety of conflicting interpretations. The main source of difficulty in explicating nirvana lies in the fact that since nirvana transcends the sense and the intellect, no positive characterization of it is possible. This is what is meant by saying that nirvana is ineffable. Quite the contrary, the concept can be discussed and rendered intelligible to the extent possible within the limits of logic and language. But this is the important point. No discourse on nirvana, however subtle and illuminating it may be, can be a substitute for actual experience. Everyone has to do his own thinking and analysis on this problem. Only thus can one command some understanding of the whole notion of nirvana. The term nirvana literally means blown out. This meaning may be the source of negative interpretation of nirvana as annihilation and cessation of the existence. Some scholars argue that by teaching the way to nirvana, the Buddha has pointed the way for men to extinguish themselves. But we can see that such an annihilationist interpretation of nirvana is absurd, because for Buddha, who himself attained nirvana, surely did not blow himself out of existence, nor is it correct to equate nirvana with death. Surely we can say that nirvana is not a negative one. According to Buddha himself, nirvana is to be attained here and now while one is still alive, not a paradise to be looked forward to after death. What then the meaning of nirvana? We answer that nirvana is a state in which one is completely free from all forms of bondage and attachment. It is the state of perfect insight into the nature of existence. He who has attained nirvana has once and for all freed himself from all the fetters that bind man to existence. He has perfect knowledge, perfect peace and perfect wisdom. It would be well to dispel here another popular but false conception of nirvana. Many scholars and laymen think that one who attains nirvana cuts himself off from the world of toil, tear and turmoil and spend his life in a state of total inactivity and indifference to the world around him. But this view is basically mistaken and foolish, because the life of Buddha himself proved the true nature of a man who attained Nirvana. Lord Buddha, after getting the enlightenment, was always with the ordinary man, loving and caring the sorrowful world. In view of this fact, it is absurd to describe Nirvana as a state of inactivity, stupor and indifference. The man who attains Nirvana is a man of knowledge, discipline and non-attachment. He always works for the well-being and liberation of his fellow men. The Nirvanic man then is the true follower of Buddha. He always adopts a middle path. He neither always sits absorbed in meditation nor is always involved in activity. He is the living testimony that the middle way is indeed the way to enlightenment. Bodhisattva. Bodhisattva ideal is a beautiful concept of an enlightenment man in Buddhism. The word literally means one bent to attaining supreme enlightenment, not merely for his own sake, but for the sake of all sentient beings. It is a special feature of Mahayana Buddhism. Its main ideal comprises of universal enlightenment. The Mahayanists regard even the desire for one's own liberation as selfish and establish the liberation of all sentient beings as the ultimate goal of every spiritual aspiration. Emancipation of all beings is the goal of Bodhisattva. This spiritual resolve is known as the Bodhisattva ideal, which distinguishes the Mahayana school from the spiritual individualism of the Hinayana school. The Bodhisattva ideal is constituted by compassion and wisdom. Out of compassion, the Bodhisattva aspires to emancipate all beings, and by means of wisdom, he realizes that in truth no being exists. The Mahayanists contend that everyone who strives for Buddhahood is a Bodhisattva and everyone can become a Buddha. Therefore, in Mahayana, the Bodhisattva ideal is a stage of discipline preparatory to the attainment of Bodhi. The Bodhisattva develop the Bodhicitta, that is, firm resolution to attain Bodhi and to fulfill the Parimitas or perfections and become a Buddha. This development includes his firm resolve that he must dedicate his life in several births to the service of others and should not care to attain his own salvation before the salvation of sentient beings. Bodhisattva needs many qualities to attain Bodhisattva ideal. Among many qualities of Bodhisattva, Mahamaitri or great love and Mahakaruna or great compassion are the chief. Maitri or love prompts a person to serve others, but Mahamaitri prompts him to offer everything, including his life, for the salvation of others. Emancipation of all beings from the suffering of death and birth is a great compassion. The Mahayana Buddhism holds that Gautama as a Bodhisattva was moved not by his own suffering, but by the suffering of all human beings. Some of the vratas of Bodhisattva are described by Sri Shantideva in his Bodhicharya Vrata. The path of Bodhisattva consists mainly in the practice of Satparimitas or 6 performance, of which Prajna Parimita is a par excellence. A successful accomplishment of these perfections carries him through Dashabhumi or 10 successive spiritual attainment. Shantideva in his work mentioned some of the devotional practices known as Angutara Puja or supreme worship for a Bodhisattva. Hendrik Simmer gives a beautiful picture of Bodhisattva ideal in his Philosophies of India. He says, the great Mahayana Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara is a personification of the highest ideal of the Mahayana Buddhist career. His legend recounts that when following a series of eminently virtuous incarnations, he was about to enter into the surcease of Nirvana. An uproar like the sound of a general thunder, rose in all the worlds. The great being knew that this was a wail, lament uttered by all created things, the rocks and stones, as well as the trees, insects, gods, animals, demons and human beings of all the spheres of the universe, at the prospect of his imminent departure from the realms of birth. And so, in his compassion, he renounced for himself the boon of Nirvana until all beings without exception should be prepared to enter in before him, like the good shepherd who permits his flock to pass first through the gate and then goes through himself, closing it behind him. Now, let us summarize. Buddhism is one of the heterodox schools in Indian philosophy. Buddhism is a philosophy as well as a religion. Buddhism is based upon the Four Noble Truths delivered by Buddha. The main teachings of Buddhism include theory of dependent origination, Ashtanga Marga, Kshanikavada, Nairatmyavada, Nirvana and the concept of Bodhisattva. Kshanikavada explains the nature of reality, or this is the ontology of Buddhism. Theory of momentariness is a great contribution of Buddhism to Indian thought. According to Buddha, nothing continues to be the same even for 2 consecutive moments. All things constantly change. The similes that are usually given are those of the river and burning flame. One cannot step in the water twice. Neither being nor non-being is real. What is real is becoming. Buddha also rejects the concept of the eternal self. For him, there is no soul. A thing is nothing but an aggregate of sense data. What we refer to as things are only aggregates of phenomena hanging together. What is called soul is a mere name for a complex of constants, Namarupa. According to Buddha, the concepts of a soul as a substrate of changing state of consciousness is a myth. According to the doctrine of nothingness, there is nothing that can be termed real. Everything in this world is momentary and nothing exists permanently either as matter or spirit. The concepts Nirvana in Buddhism is a very complex concept and has been the subject of variety of conflicting interpretations. The terms Nirvana literally means blown out. This meaning may be the source of the negative interpretation of Nirvana as annihilation and cessation of the existence. But such a negative interpretation of Nirvana is absurd. We can see that Nirvana is a state in which one is completely free from all forms of bondage and attachment. He who has attained Nirvana has once and for all freed himself from all fetters that bind men to existence. He has perfect knowledge, perfect peace and perfect wisdom. Bodhisattva ideal is a beautiful concept of an enlightenment man in Buddhism. Here are some questions for you to work out. 1. Give a short account of the Kshanikavada. Explain the concept of Bodhisattva in Buddhism. 3. Describe the Anatmavada in the teachings of Buddha. 4. Give an account of the concept of Nirvana. 5. How the Four Noble Truths related to the Kshanikavada. Explain. 6. Critically examine the ideal of Bodhisattva in Mahayana Buddhism. 7. What are the philosophical problems in the concept of Nirvana? State its positive and negative aspects. I can suggest some books for your further reference. Indian Philosophy by Dr. S. Radhakrishnan, Volume 1, Oxford University Press, 1923. A History of Indian Philosophy by Surendranath Das Gupta, Volume 4, Motilal Banarsidass, 1991. History of Pre-Buddhist Indian Philosophy by B. M. Baru, Calcutta University, 1921. A Survey of Buddhism, Indian Institute of World Culture by Bhikshu Sangarakshita, Bangalore 1959. A History of Buddhist Thought by E. J. Thomas, New York 1951. Idealistic Thought of India by P. T. Raju, George Ellen and Unwin, London 1953. A Pilgrimage of Buddhism and a Buddhist Pilgrimage by J. B. Pratt, Marmillion 1928. A Manual of Buddhism by C. A. F. Rhys Davids, London 1932. Thank you for watching this session. See you next time. Until then, bye.